All right, and welcome back into a Monday no-huddle edition of Another Carolina podcast. Getting it kicked off again this week. Apologize for not having a no-huddle edition last week. That was completely on me and my stomach virus, but back doing well this week. And joined now, of course, I'm Wes Mitchell, joined with Chris Clark, and discussing the Gamecocks' 24-7 win over Vanderbilt on Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium. A little bit of a weird game, Chris. Statistically, I thought South Carolina, for the most part, dominated the flow of the game. You look at the sort of yards per play, just the way the game progressed. Seemed like South Carolina controlled the line of scrimmage and, had way more big plays than Vanderbilt. But due to some issues, I would say, with penalties, some issues in short yardage, and some issues, fumbling the football inside the 20 in one of their early drives, really just couldn't put Vanderbilt away early on. Finally did put them away in the second half and gets a 24-7 win. Maybe not the prettiest win in the world, but ultimately a win that if you're South Carolina, you'll take and move on to the next week.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, if you're South Carolina, you want to be talking about a win rather than a loss, right? I mean, that's always the case. You don't want to split hairs with it too badly, especially when this is a season that has not gone according to plan, with the exception of, showing well against Alabama, beating Georgia. I mean, there's losses on the ledger right now to North Carolina and a close loss, a 20-point loss to Tennessee, a loss to Missouri that sometimes bordered on the bizarre in terms of what happened in the game, another road loss that was, a multi-score game. So right now you take a win. And you take away some positives and some negatives from the performance overall, some things that South Carolina certainly has to get cleaned up that I know we'll cover those. I know we'll cover the positives and negatives, but overall, it's a win, and it's a fairly convincing win overall. There were certainly moments in the game that I think led to some trepidation on the part of the fan base or even the media for good reason. But it was a win, and one that, like you said, Wes, it was after South Carolina was able to.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the stats in this game, Chris. First downs, 25-12, South Carolina's favor. Third down efficiency, 9 for 15 for the Gamecocks, just 3 of 12 for Vanderbilt. Total yards, 440 to 189. You look at passing yards, 235 for South Carolina, just 76 for Vanderbilt. They were just 11 of 21 in the passing game. Obviously, they had some quarterback issues that were beyond their control. 205 rushing yards for Carolina, 113 for Vandy. And then I think you look at the turnovers, and just 1 for South Carolina, 2 for Vanderbilt, and South Carolina obviously wins the time of possession, almost 34 minutes for them and 26 minutes for Vanderbilt. The big thing being 11 penalties for South Carolina for 94 yards, and then just 2 penalties for 20 yards for Vanderbilt. So really, as far as going up and down the field, South Carolina dominated this football game. Like I said, some of the penalties, the one costly turnover for South Carolina was big in that it took away a scoring opportunity. South Carolina, as I said, struggled in some short yardage that kept them from finishing off drives. But, I thought for the most part South Carolina had this game in hand. They didn't really turn the football over other than the one early one. Second half turnovers has been a big topic of discussion. They protected the football. I really don't, sort of going through the game in my head right now, I don't remember the ball really being in danger much at all as far as Ryan Helinski goes, in the passing game. So overall, I mean, I know a lot of people are saying it wasn't a pretty win, and I guess I agree with that, but I actually left thinking there were some real positives to take away from this game as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, look, you don't want beating Vanderbilt to be, a huge accomplishment with where this program wants to be. Okay. But again, this is a team that's had a disappointing season. At this point, it's just about getting as many wins as you can, trying to make that bowl game, trying to finish out the season as strong as possible. And they did it again. Were there some things during the game, the first drive defensively, the short yardage situations, the penalties, the turnover for South Carolina, the fumble by Mondenson. Yeah, those are things that were not great, but this is still a convincing win. Once again, like I said, once they got on track, it wasn't as if the game was in danger. Once they were able to sort of finally pull away there, you got the feeling that they were sort of controlling the game after that first defensive drive, and that they would do enough offensively, and they did. So that said, I mean, the SEC East, after the top, couple teams, has really been open. I mean, it's been wide open. It's been weird, really. You look at how Tennessee has turned around its year. They're a much better football team now. You look at how Missouri has been really, really up and down. Vanderbilt beats this Missouri team, again, with quarterback questions in this game. That's been another storyline as well. South Carolina's fortunate that Riley Neal went out after that first series. I mean, maybe so, probably so, but they're missing Mo Hassan, who'd come on in that Missouri game. They're missing Kalijah Lipscomb. They haven't gotten the ball all year for some reason to their really good tight end, Jared Pinkney. All those things are fortunate for South Carolina, but they also are, playing without their starting running back. They lost Tavian Feaster during the game a couple times because he was banged up. They had the turnover early. They lost Josh Vann. They lost Nick Muse. Shi Smith didn't play. So this was still a game where they battled a little bit of adversity too. And, they were able to overcome it. I thought Ryan Helinski played extremely well. Again, it's been, I guess, just a huge coincidence, Wes, that when Ryan Helinski's healthy, he looks really good. I guess that's just a complete coincidence. But he got the ball out quickly. Like you said, ball's not really ever in danger. I remember there was one early throw to Nick Muse that he underthrew just a bit, ended up getting broken up. But he got the ball out quickly, used his arm angles to get the ball out on some of those shorter passes. They had a couple failures in the short yardage situations, but overall there's a lot to like. Brian Edwards is a warrior. I mean, that was one of the best single receiver performances that I've seen. And you look at what they did. Are we going to talk a little bit about sort of breaking down the offense? And I need to maybe shut up so we can break that down a little bit more further. Yeah, if we just go into that a little bit, sort of maybe not drive by drive, but I did want to hit on that a little bit in terms of just what happened, what stalled them out, what got them on track.
Yeah, we'll go into all that. I sort of, as we were watching, I sort of rewatching the game, put thumbs up, thumbs down beside a bunch of different things, and I wrote down thumbs up, Ryan Helinski thumbs up, Brian Edwards thumbs up, young players overall, Fenwick, Leggett, Kevin Harris thumbs up, offensive line play for the most part thumbs up, really no pressure from Vanderbilt in the passing game, which was a key coming in. Thumbs down penalties, thumbs down short yardage. And like you just said, man, I thought Helinski managed the game very, very well. The decision-making was good. Made some nice throws sort of off-platform, as you'd say. And he's always been good at that, man. He's got a knack for, even if it's not maybe traditionally – we've talked about this before, traditionally perfect form as far as what you would teach as a quarterback coach, as far as his balance goes. He does a good job of being able to throw well without necessarily getting his feet completely set. And the ball comes out with some zip. He did a good job on some of these RPOs, or at least what appeared to be RPOs, of getting them, making good decisions, getting the ball out quick and putting it in the right spot. So, Ryan, I think, displayed once again his immense upside and talent. Like you said, Brian Edwards continues to put his name in Gamecock history, you would say. And, I don't know if we've maybe given him enough credit just for how good he is. I think this year he's taken his game to another level. Let's go ahead and go into the offense then, since that's sort of on your mind. I thought offensive play calling was actually really good. There was one call that I hated. It was an early 3rd and 1, and they went back to the little I don't even know what you'd call it. It's not necessarily a jet sweep. It's not even the jet sweep pass. It is a jet sweep pass, but it's at a little different angle, sort of underneath the offensive line. If you remember the play I'm talking about, they had hit Edwards for a decent gain a couple of plays earlier. Then they went back to it on 3rd and 1. And I thought that was just a little bit too much of a cute play that invited penetration, invited maybe that's a play that could go for a big play, but that's also a play that could get you a negative play on the 3rd and 1. And that's what happened. He got hit a yard behind the line, and South Carolina ended up having to punt on that drive, I believe. So didn't really like that call, but some of the other stuff they did I really, really liked from a general game plan standpoint. They didn't hit any deep balls, but they had a few shots called that Vandy covered up pretty well, I thought. But some of the underneath stuff, setting it up a little bit differently than they have in the past. Some of the quick sort of slip screens to Brian Edwards were really good. I loved the play down at the goal line in the first half when they brought Edwards in motion, and he looked like he was going to do they bring him in motion a lot these days. It looked like it was either going to be another jet sweep or an orbit motion. They motioned him into the backfield, and with him being the player that's furthest to the left of the formation, and I believe Vandy in man coverage, Vandy's man followed him and started sort of getting into the trash of the linebacking core. And when guys follow that receiver, they have to create more depth. They have to get further away from the line of scrimmage in order to follow him in motion. So as soon as Edwards, was going from left to right, they snapped the ball, and Edwards pivots, comes back left, and they just flip the ball out to him on a little just flare pass, a little flat pass. And that went for a first down, almost a touchdown. I thought that was a beautiful wrinkle. And then they had this play, Chris, that they hit several times. One of them resulted in a Kyle Markway hold, which you texted me at the time and said, man, they are ticky-tack on Kyle Markway, and only Kyle Markway, it seems like. But you'll remember they hit this on several sort of long yardage situations, which I thought it was a great adjustment for the fact that the offensive line has struggled, in pass protection when teams can pin their ears back. But it's actually a wide receiver shallow cross that turns into a screen. So, but in this situation, the wide receiver, for example, is lined up on the left side, and he runs just a regular shallow cross across the formation. But the key to this play is that, your receivers that are all to the right side of the field are all going down to block. They're not even running routes. They're all going out to block. And then the other key is that the receiver has to get back behind the line of scrimmage, because this play has to be completed behind the line of scrimmage, or else it's going to be an offensive PI. And they called this play, I think, off the top of my head, 3 separate times. It was successful all 3 times. One of them, like I said, got shot back because of the hold. But I thought this was a really good adjustment for long yardage situations in the passing game. And Carolina executed it very well all 3 times. Tack hold. And there were just some that they did a little pin and pull RPO out to Muse in the flat, the opposite direction of the pin and pull, that got a big gain. That was actually the play that he got hurt. They had another where they had the pin and pull one direction, and they had a little Brian Edwards slip screen to the other direction that worked well. So, as much as the offense has been talked about this year and sort of, in a negative light, and people like to talk about play calling, that we talked about some of the reasons these drives didn't finish. But I thought as far as overall game planning, having some new stuff in, the wrinkles with getting to Kerryon Joyner on the field a little bit, I thought South Carolina actually had a
it's crazy,
little
Wes,
game plan.
what you're saying is going to be sort of controversial, right? I mean, honestly, because I had the same thought during the game. I agree with you. The biggest issue for me was it was that pass, that little pop pass or whatever you want to call it. I can understand it. It's not as if South Carolina had a ton of great success on the 3rd and short, or even the 4th and short with Kevin Harris. I thought it was the spot, maybe a little off there. Really hard to tell from the angle that we had. I thought live that Kevin Harris got it, but they called him short, and that was another situation where you turn it over down there and you lose at least 3 points, maybe 7. And so maybe the thought there was, hey, we're not blocking it up real well, or there've been some similar situations where we haven't blocked up real well. Maybe something they thought Vandy would do schematically to plug up the middle, so they try to go wide. But I didn't love that play call, but other than that, I thought they did some good things. One of the criticisms I've seen is that, well, Brian Edwards bailed him out. Well, yeah, that's what, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the best offensive teams, which South Carolina is not right now, but just as sort of an example, the best offensive teams in the country, what do they consistently do? They don't turn it over a ton, and they get the ball to their playmakers. And so Brian Edwards is really the main one right now, especially with Shi Smith out, who's been, he's made some big plays. He hasn't been as consistent as I think people have wanted, but he's made some big plays. Rico Dowdle's out. Feaster's sort of in and out of the game, and Edwards has been a war daddy this year. I mean, every time he gets the ball, I mean, it's crazy. He's fighting through contact. He's getting yards after the catch. He can beat you deep. And so there's absolutely nothing wrong with going into a game and say, we are going to design ways to get the ball to Brian Edwards in a variety of ways. And he did it a lot of different ways. I mean, they put him in motion. They gave him, sort of jet sweep concepts. They gave him the deep ball that Helinski checked into. They gave him some stuff over the middle that you've already sort of diagrammed out for the listeners. So to me, I think if you're an offensive play caller and you know that for a variety of reasons, including injuries, the other team, it's not as if Vandy went into the game saying, God, I wonder who South Carolina is going to try to get the ball to. Like it's just some big mystery. No, they're going to try to get it to Edwards. And I think it shows some creativity to get the ball to him in a variety of different ways. Now, has the offense been as good as it's needed to be this year? No. And I think there have been some rough games. Missouri's won. North Carolina was one. There's a lot of things that go into that. But I didn't have as much of a problem. I thought that, the execution in some of the third and shorts was lacking at times. I thought, the one play call, again, I wasn't a huge fan of. And, they, of course, had the turnover, missed on some other opportunities. They had some penalties that made it tough. I mean, you look at the first drive. Let's go, first drive. Now you could split hairs and say, well, they didn't have a good enough play call on first and second down. They shouldn't be in 3rd and 9. Okay, you can say that. But the 3rd and 9 play they drew up was a good play call because it was a one-on-one and the guy was wide open. And Josh Van dropped the pass. It was a first down. Next play, they go 66 yards, and they fumble it at the 9-yard line. Good drive. Pretty good play calling because you get down there. I don't call a fumble a bad play call. That's just my opinion. But I don't. The next drive, it is the one where we talked about get the 3rd and 1, and you go with the little pass concept to Brian Edwards on the little jet, and they lose, so they have to punt. Okay, the next 2 drives are touchdowns to end the half. Then you've got to punt on the next drive to start the second half. There are 3 different penalties on that drive. No, one of them was just a delay of game to go punt the ball. But you had the weird play where Helinski caught the ball and then threw it again. So they go from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 24. Already tough. Then you get a 3rd and 18. They complete a pass and that's holding. So then you're 3rd and 22, right? And then they run a draw and then they go punt. Your next drive is the one where, you get the ball back, and you get 2nd one. You try to throw the ball incomplete. If you want to, talk about the play call there, I'm all for it. Maybe you go run the ball there and pick up the first down, but then you get stuffed twice on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. You think when you have 3, when you're at 2nd and 1, a lot of offensive play callers will tell you open up the playbook. I mean, you got a down, you got 2 downs and maybe 3.
Absolutely.
Which is the route that South Carolina took. They said 2nd and 1. Hey, let's take a little shot here in the passing game. If not, we got a down or maybe 2 to go get it, and then they didn't get it. So then you get a field goal, then you get a touchdown, and then it's basically, it's pretty much the end of the game. So again, you look at it. They had one drive that was really, really hampered by 2 major penalties, an illegal forward pass and a holding penalty. You had 1 fumble, and you had 1 where you failed in short yardage. This wasn't a game that had 100 snaps. I think South Carolina took, what did we have inside the snap count? 81? Is that right? I think about 81 snaps. And defensively, they only took 54.
Yes.
So, sort of a shortened game from a snaps perspective. So, yeah, I thought, first drive you had a drop. You have one end in a drop, you have one end in a fumble, and you have two major penalties on the same drive that puts you in a third and, very, very long situation. And so, to me, the biggest takeaway from this football game was not the offensive play calling. I think it was the penalties. I think it was the short yardage failures. I didn't have as much of a issue with play calling in this particular game. I'm on board with you, and I think people are going to get mad at us about that because they only scored 24 points, or they're going to project what happened in other games. But I think we're talking about this game. I sort of like some of the things that they did, but they're going to have to clean it up a lot and be much better if they're going to have any chance of success these next three.
Yeah, and like I said, I liked a lot of what they did. You're talking about a number of guys that you're down to your third or fourth guys at some spots. I don't know if we talked about it earlier in the show, but Ja'Kai Moore starts at right tackle, and you're at your third guy at right tackle. We talked about you're at your third and fourth running backs. You're missing Shi Smith. You are limited on some of the stuff you can do there, and I just thought the plan. And I don't know if we've talked enough about as much as we sort of people have nitpicked the negative. If you look at this offense last year, most of the time, Brian Edwards is lined up on one side of the field and Deebo Samuel is lined up on the other. And, especially when they're in three wide, you had Shi in the slot. But those guys were on set sides of the field most of the time. And you look this year, South Carolina has made it, especially with Shi Smith out this past week, South Carolina made a concerted effort to move Brian Edwards around. He's lined up in the boundary by himself at times. He's lined up to the side where the trips are at. At times, he's motioned a lot. We talked about some of the funky things they did with motion. He's motioned into the slot where you get him matched up with maybe a nickel back as opposed to a number one corner. You talked about how some people sort of said, well, Brian Edwards bailed him out. These weren't 50-50 balls that Brian Edwards is just going up in coverage and making a play. These are plays designed to get Brian Edwards the ball in space. And then to his credit, Brian Edwards did what he was supposed to do. He also had a really nice punt return that put South Carolina in good field position as well. I think we got to give the special teams credit there. We got to give the defense credit for creating two short fields, for the offense as well. But, they went with the plan of, hey, this is the best receiver. Hey, Shi Smith is out. Get the ball to Brian Edwards in a variety of ways, and it worked. And, I think as we go to some of these other guys that played well that are young players, you look at some of these PFF grades, which I always sort of, I admittedly, I think PFF is a great source for a lot of things, particularly our snap count stuff. How many snaps did the guy play? How many avoided tackles were there? How many pressures were there, both created by your defense and allowed by your offensive line? Lots of great stuff on here. I don't always agree with the actual grades overall, and I tend to grade a freshman a bit on a scale almost. As far as let's talk about Deshaun Fenwick, man. I mean, this guy has not played. Not he's only played a little bit. As far as this season, Deshaun Fenwick has been MIA, missing in action. We get asked about him on the message boards fairly often, like what's going on with Deshaun Fenwick. Most people that follow South Carolina football on Gamecock Central have just assumed, and it sounds like at one point, rightfully so, that Fenwick was going to just transfer after this year and be done with it because he's not sniffed the field. He gets 33 snaps against Vanderbilt on Saturday night and absolutely makes the most of it. To me, I'm looking at his grades right now on PFF. I know there were some plays left out there. Muschamp talked about it. The running backs actually missed an opportunity to maybe have a massive day on the ground. if you just make one more guy miss. To their credit, Vandy's safeties, I would say, did a good job of getting South Carolina's players down in space and sort of keeping it at a 10, 11, 12, 13-yard gain as opposed to a 50-yard gain. Give them credit for that. Yeah, there's some yards to be had, but, dude, I thought Deshaun Fenwick, as far as running to daylight, finding holes, getting north and south, running not necessarily where he's breaking a tackle, but falling forward through contact. Just considering that we haven't even talked about this guy at all this year as far as making an impact, I thought Fenwick stepped in and played very, very well. I'm not even going to say his grade on the show here, man, because his PFF grade was very, very low. But I thought the kid stepped in and played pretty well. Just me personally. I get that there were a few yards left out there, but all things considered, the running game, here's to me what stands out. You brought in Deshaun Fenwick. Mondenson had the early fumble. I guess he was in the doghouse the rest of the game. Kevin Harris. So you have Deshaun Fenwick play 31 snaps. Kevin Harris played 20 snaps. Tavian Feaster, of course, we all know about what he's done all year long. He was himself. I thought it was just typical Tavian Feaster day. He's dealing with some injuries. The running game didn't miss a beat. To me, that's a huge compliment.
I think the one missing element was the one you said, the one Muschamp touched on is, if you've got Dowdle or Feaster's healthier during the game or can play more snaps, if he is healthy, maybe you have a little bit more of an explosive, capability in the run game. Maybe you get maybe you do break off one of those long touchdown runs. Because certainly they had some one-on-one opportunities in the secondary, but I think you got to credit Kevin Harris for what he did. I mean, how about his catch on that pitch, to go in there and bring the ball down that was behind him one-handed and then go, bully into the end zone was a heck of a play. Fenwick did a really nice job in terms of getting past that first level. That's the first step. I mean, get past the first level, make some cuts, get into space, follow your blockers. South Carolina's done a good job in the run game, whether it's the pin and pull type stuff or whatever, zone, whatever they may be running. They've been pretty good run blocking this season, getting a hat on a hat. And so I thought he showed some good patience and some pretty good initial vision to get out into space. It was just that missing element of, and I thought the same thing live. There were, I know, 2 plays off the top of my head I can think of where he was in space to where if he could have made one more guy miss, he breaks some longer runs. One of them may have been a touchdown, to be frank, if he could have gotten past the safety who made the play. But it was a really good performance. I mean, he gets out into space. He averages, 5.7 yards a carry. I mean, I thought it was a good performance by Fenwick because, again, like you pointed out earlier, he hasn't played. This isn't even Mondenson stepping up and being the lead back. Like a guy who's played a lot of football during his career and B, a decent amount of football even this season. This is a guy that's seen carries in 3 career games. He's had 200-yard games out of those 3 games, at the Chattanooga game last year and now this one. And were there some opportunities and one-on-ones that were left out there? Yeah, and I think that's been one element of his game that has that the coaching staff has been sort of harping on and trying to get him to be more consistent is finishing those plays in the open field. But I think you got to give him a lot of credit for making the plays that he did to get to the second level. He grinded out yardage. He ran through contact. And Will Muschamp was very frank and honest in the post-game press conference and talking about how Deshaun had come to him and talked about transferring and had been frustrated, and it was understandable why he was frustrated. But, just in talking to him, got him to stick it out. And, when his number was called, he was ready. And so I think that's a testament to Deshaun and to Thomas Brown and to Will Muschamp for, keeping those guys ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, Xavier Legette sort of finally, got to play a bunch. He's played all year long on special teams. He's played in spurts at wide receiver. I mean, this is obviously his most extensive playing time. But, dude, you look out there at times, Jay Urich is on the field. Bailey Hart is on the field at wide receiver. South Carolina really getting, sort of deep into their depth at receiver and at tight end, and they'll have to sort of continue to look at some things there. But, I thought Legette did some good things, man. Obviously, he had his first career touchdown, had a couple other catches. I don't know if you caught this or noticed this, Chris, but on one of the late third downs, South Carolina ended up, I think, having to throw the football away, and they actually the play wasn't completed anyway, but they got called for an illegal formation because there was a motion, and the guy didn't get back onto the line of scrimmage like he needed to with a shift, and but Leggett actually broke free and was standing wide open in the back of the end zone, like with his hands going back and forth, like throw the ball to me. So I guess it would have been negated anyway, but was definitely open for what could have been his second career touchdown and second touchdown of the day. But, I think Muschamp, again, has sort of been honest about Leggett when he talks about him. He sort of always gives the caveat, hey, remember, this guy was a quarterback. He's still learning the position. I think there are still some that tells me there are still some sort of things as far as the intricacies of the position that he's definitely learning. But physical ability, man, we've heard about this kid ever since June. When guys start arriving and there starts being a little bit of a buzz about what guys are making plays. The buzz within the program has been positive about this kid for a long time. You and I talk a lot about sort of the future and stuff like that and looking ahead. Xavier Leggett's going to have to play a bunch for the Gamecocks next year. And now I think with the Josh Van injury, Shi Smith obviously banged up this past week. They hope to get him back this coming week, but we'll see on that. Hamstrings can be funky. I think if you have to hold Shi Smith out another week just to get him 100% for A&M and Clemson, then I think you probably do that. We'll see. But good opportunity for Xavier Leggett. I'd love to see, from a South Carolina perspective, I'd love to see them continue to find some ways to try to get this kid the ball and let him get more comfortable and just go play and sort of learn on the job some of these intricacies of that position.
Yeah, and one thought that I've had throughout the season, Wes, is, you go back and look at Xavier Leggett, and, he had the one catch against Kentucky. It was his first catch of his career. On the surface, you may go, well, the guy needs to see the field more. Well, that could certainly be argued, but he has played some snaps this year. He's played in every game, and he's been on special teams, and he's actually seen a decent amount of snaps at receiver from game one on. But it just so happened that he got, more opportunities in this game. And again, he's a guy that is just very much learning, like you said, on the job. He just didn't have any experience. And so his route tree, he's still limited in some things that he can do there, things that he knows how to do, rather. He can do all of them. I mean, he's got that type of ability. So he's still learning. But I think you look at some things that he's done blocking. Obviously, he can catch the football. He's got excellent hands. That's always something that he's shown, just natural ability to run, ability to leap. And I remember, you talked about this summer when we heard about him and then into the preseason. I remember the first couple of things that we heard about Xavier was, a great catch that he had in practice, a one-hander in practice, and then his ability going to cover kicks, just how fast he looked doing that. So this is a big kid with natural ball skills who can really run. And when you see those things, if you can put them together from a mental standpoint, you have a chance to have a really, really good player. And so, look, it takes time for some of these guys. Not all of them are finished products or completely ready to contribute, whether it's a mental or physical standpoint or both, when they're true freshmen. And so he's been able to play some this year, and his role is probably going to expand going forward, but he's got a chance to be a really, really good one.
Yeah, and I think to add to everything you just said, from everything I've heard, this is a kid that wants it too, that wants to be great, and has been through some personal tragedy in his life that sort of drives him, and is the type of kid because of that you have to pull for. So I think this guy's got a bright future at South Carolina. Staff seems to love him. The fact that with Shi Smith out, that he's the guy they chose to put back there as the kickoff returner this past week says about all you need to know about his sort of potential as a game breaker and a guy who can go make some plays. We've talked for a long time, and we really have not, as much as this was a defensive battle, we haven't talked a ton about the defense. I'll admit, I sort of go through when I rewatch the game, I watch all the offense and I watch all the defense. I'm still haven't quite got through my defensive rewatch, but Chris, what were your takeaways defensively? Obviously, Vanderbilt was dealing with it from a quarterback standpoint. Mo Hassan had sort of given them a little bit of a boost, but then, they don't have him for this game, still in concussion protocol. Injuries are part of it, but that obviously affected their ability to move the football through the air. But I guess give credit to South Carolina's defense as well for not allowing big plays, keeping the running game bottled up. And, it really, to me, what the defense was what allowed the offense to sort of have some of these little issues and it not hurt them as far as being able to win the game, because the defense, other than the first drive where they had some killer penalties, they just kept getting off the field.
They did. And I think, again, Vanderbilt dealing with some difficult circumstances with sort of the musical chairs at quarterback. Kalijah Lipscomb did not play. Again, another weird situation there as to why. And then for some reason, they have not gotten the ball to Jared Pinkney this year. I mean, this guy athletically is one of the best tight ends in the country. I mean, he's an NFL-type player. And I think they targeted him 3 times. Did he even had a catch? I don't know that he had a catch. I remember that he was targeted 3 times, but they just haven't gotten him the ball. It's been bizarre. So they haven't been very explosive or very good really on offense. And Keyshawn Vaughn's really been the lone bright spot. He's been good ever since he transferred over to Vanderbilt. He's a player that, gives you a lot of concern. If you're a Gamecock fan or if you're on that coaching staff or as a player, you know what he can do. But he just didn't do a whole lot. His longest run was 12 yards. You look, he averaged 4.4 yards a carry, which he's averaged 5.2 this season. And then he's put up some, even in a loss to UNLV, he's 9.3 a carry. He was 6.5 against LSU, went for 130 yards against Georgia. He averaged 4.9, had a 16-yard long. So there's only been one other game, and that was a win against Missouri, actually, where his long was only 12 yards or less. And, if you look at the Missouri game, he only averaged 3.3 a carry. He got 96 yards, took him 29 carries. But the end of that game, when they had to move the chains and run out the clock, Keyshawn Vaughn got it done. So obviously a different game in this situation because Vanderbilt's playing from behind. But he just never could get anything going with consistency. And I think South Carolina frustrated him. They rattled him a little bit, I think. Just stopping him in the backfield some, hitting him, not letting him get to that second level where he's so dangerous.
Yeah, and this is a Vanderbilt offense that has really not been very good, and it's just like you said, has had some weird shiz going on. You got that's the only way I know how to say it. You got Lipscomb, who is supposedly healthy, standing over there with a towel on his head for what was termed as personal reasons, according to his head coach. I don't know if you caught the Cole Kubelik post-halftime little side interview where he had talked to Derek Mason, and he asked Derek Mason, is your quarterback going to be back in this game? And he basically said, I don't know. And which, sometimes a coach doesn't know, but he basically said, you'll have to ask my offensive coordinator. That's up to him. And it was just, you could tell Cole Kubelik sort of had just this weird expression on his face and was sort of like, how has there not been communication here to where the head coach knows what's going on with his quarterback? Like, it's not a situation where you're talking about, a third string special teams guy. The head coach doesn't know what's going on. I don't know. Just the whole Vanderbilt offense, something ain't right. It feels like, but that's a problem that South Carolina fans will love to just let Vanderbilt have and deal with, and to take their win and move on if you're Carolina. But there's something about getting to play Vanderbilt that helps you get right, I think, as a South Carolina program. Is this
that
10
would be 11
or 11
in a row? That would be 11.
I should know that. Yeah, 11 in a row. So, Gamecocks get the win. I guess we've hit on about, I think, all the major topics for this game. As I said, later on this week, we'll be in studio 107.5 Pearson Fowler. We'll do that show, and we'll talk more big picture and preview App State as well. But Chris, you want to tell everybody about
Terry Bishop, former Gamecock quarterback, still a huge supporter of the program, and 36 years of experience in the real estate business. So if you're looking to buy a home, if you're looking to sell your home, or if you want to invest in some real estate in the greater Columbia area, make sure you call Terry Bishop, his wife Becky Bishop of the Bishop Real Estate Group. Facebook.com/the Terry Bishop Team, or 803-665-1442. We appreciate his support of all our football content, including our podcast this year.
Also want to thank Slotsky's Deli. Enjoyed a wonderful tailgating tray from Slotsky's Deli before the game on Saturday, and you can as well for absolutely free if you win our Pick'em contest, which is posted on the Insiders Forum and Fighting Gamecocks Forum. Every single week you can win a huge tailgating tray. Includes everything you need, your sandwiches, your chips, plates, silverware, stuff like that. Love the Slotsky's Deli hookup that we get from those guys, and want for you to be able to enjoy it as well. We'll sort of close it out here. By the way, we haven't done enough questions on the board for the podcast, so if you want to throw some questions at us for Wednesday's podcast, we'll talk some big picture stuff. I'll start a thread for that if anybody wants their questions to be answered on the podcast. Chris, any final thoughts?
I think for South Carolina, look, for all the talk about what went right, what went wrong in this game, they won the football game. They did lose a couple players that, the Muse one really hurt because, that hurts your ability going forward to play 12 personnel. They're probably going to have to do a little bit less of that. They did play Chandler Farrell a lot. Keyshawn Toney will see some action. Trey Kenyon could get in there, even though he'll be behind the curve from a mental standpoint. But, that was a tough loss because he did some nice things blocking and obviously could catch the football, had 17 catches this season. But I think the biggest takeaway is you get a win, and now you're at some other spots, even though you had two defections that are key there, especially with Muse and Josh Van going down. You're getting some guys back. Rico Dowdle coming back, Dylan Wanham coming back. Whether it's Damani Staley and Jamar Brown also, you're getting some guys who are key players for you. And Rico Dowdle obviously had a real good year before he went down. Dylan Wanham, we know what he can do at right tackle. It helps solidify things over there. I think it's going to be key for this stretch run. And so it comes at a really good time for South Carolina. And they really need to go try to win these next two, to go make a bowl game. I think is very important for them.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. I should have mentioned the injuries a little bit more early on, but like you said, they get Rico back. Dylan Wanham, I've made it clear in the podcast, I think they've missed him a ton. So hopefully that'll help solidify that side of the line. I think if you're looking at it, that it definitely will. For Chris Clark, I'm Wes Mitchell. This has been our No Huddle edition of Another Carolina podcast. We'll see you on Wednesday.